think, yes, you can hear me. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm your moderator for today, this afternoon's discussion on the important topic of gender equality and where we find ourselves at this part of the century, early part of the century. But more of that in a moment. Firstly, I just want to say to all of you, thank you for being here, and it's great to have so many people here. The only thing I can say is it's a bit unfortunate that if you look around the room, whilst we have women, probably 80% in the room, men, and I respect the men that I hear, but my goodness, really? It's still not seen as a topic for men to make the time to turn up to talk about something like this. And it just, sorry, I had to get that off my chest. I'm so irritated by this. It's that this is a third, no, probably this fifth event that we've done in as many years on the issue of gender equality, and the room is always packed with women, and men just don't turn up. And then men want to talk about allyship, and you think to yourself, really, in your absence? So there, I've got it off my chest, and let's see, let's say that's the elephant in the room. No, but it's true. As you need to say it rather than be apologetic or excuse it. But there we are. For those of men who are here, please use your male social capital to get more men in spaces like this so that we can have a proper conversation about gender equality. So this particular discussion comes at the end of a long process, a project around gender equality, and looking at, how there's a little bit of, text enshrined in the Lisbon, as a part of the Lisbon Treaty that's brought into effect in 2009, which established some clear rules of the game around equality and gender equality. And, we are here where we are now after 2009, and, certain things persist. We know that despite same work for men and women are still getting like 98 euros, 98 cents of a euro, as opposed to men getting more. We do know that that in fact, in terms of educational opportunities, okay, whilst early on girls do pretty well, later on not so well. We do know that women are still not entering STEM, science, technology, etc., as much as they should be, but because I think there's a range of signals in the home, in the community and in school that doesn't actually encourage girls to go into STEM subjects. But also the world of work, we still have gendered world of work. Why is it there aren't that many men involved in primary education across Europe? I mean, really, why? We have to ask ourselves that question. Why is it that, in terms of primary education and schooling, the majority are women? And where you've got men, they're teaching the science, technology, etc. subjects, in the main across Europe and elsewhere. So inequality persists, and it's really quite, shocking, depressing, and breeding a sense of anger that you should have, we should all have, is that when we've got now AI that can do the most amazing things and create a gendered society, actually, women continue to still be left behind in many, many ways. And how do we kind of upend that and, turn around a different kind of narrative and dialogue around gender equality, which has to stop being about women making the case for equality. And it can't be about proving the importance or the need for women to have the same material outcomes, life chances, life opportunities as men. I think that's a last century dialogue. It should be about expectation and a norm. And how do you norm gender equality into the hearts, minds of children, families, mothers in particular as well, fathers, and schools and employers, etc., and in the heart of politics as well. We've seen far too many good women, political leaders, who've given up this year. Absolute heroines who've actually stood aside and thought, actually, I'm not going to keep up with this anymore or do this anymore for various reasons. So, a long, big, bold subject matter that we need to discuss, but it gives me firstly the great pleasure to invite Laura, who has been on the in this program, leading this project. So give us a sense of what this project's been about and why it's important. I'll invite our panelists to discuss the issues you raised. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Please, you can.
Hola. It's on, no?
It's on.
It's on. Okay, thank you very much all for being here in the final event of our project, EU Right. I am going to explain you briefly the project to which this event, this interesting event, Gender Equality in Europe Progress or Retreat, takes part, and then we can give the floor to the speakers that for sure they are going to tell you very interesting approaches and things about the gender equality in Europe. But to start with, more or less 3 years ago, we started with our project, right? We had to delay all the activities because because of the COVID time, but now we are really happy to have you all here in person in this room. I have to thank you also, Friends of Europe, for the outstanding organization of this event. It's a really pleasure to work with you. But now back to our project. The All Right project, the title of our project is the Connecting Citizens with the Charter of Fundamental Rights. This project belongs to the Europe for Citizens program. The aims of the Europe for Citizens programs is promote the understanding between the European Union and the citizens and to raise awareness about the European values. And our project was focused in the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. That is a document that is not really well known among the citizens, and with this project we try to involve students, especially young people, because this document is very important. Professor Celle is going to explain later a little bit what's about the Charter of the Fundamental Rights, because it's kind of a link between the different legal bases linked to the human rights and the fundamental rights. The two more objectives of our project, Your Right, is also to engage citizens in European affairs. Nowadays it's very important due to the Euroscepticism that people, especially young people, they will have like a better approach and a better understanding of the European institution, and that they should feel like more European. And also, the third objective is this understanding of the European Union. And in this project, we were not alone. My name is Laura González and I represent the city of Gijón. It's the project coordination, but in this project we were together in a partnership with the city of Nuremberg. All our colleagues are here today in the room, with the municipality of Alba Iulia, the community of Genoa, the University of 1st December of Alba Iulia, and Friends of Europe that are organizing today this event. And the outcomes, how we achieve the project objectives, we plan in our project, we design a strategy to reach the citizens. The first point and the most important point was to organize citizens debates, transnational events that I am going to explain you later, with different audience, with different approach, to make closer and to understand better the European Charter. Another very important point, outcome of our project, is the learning platform. The learning platform was developed by Alba Iulia, and I invite you, later I am going to show you the link, I invite you to join our online training course, because with the online training course you will get also a better understanding of the European Charter, one of our project objectives, and you can also get a certificate. It's like a kind of official training course. Another outcome was the online participation. For the online participation, we count with Debate in Europe, with organization Debate in Europe, and it's also online, the outcomes of this online participation. And last but not least, we are developing also a toolbox and repository about interesting documents related to the European Charter. And now back to the main point of our project, to organize this citizens dialogue. We started in Alba Iulia in January 2022 with a mixed event at that time due to the COVID time. Unfortunately, we couldn't come to Alba Iulia, but they are organized a very interesting event about vulnerable groups linked to the European Charter, and the main target audience was university students, but also other associations. Our second event was in Genoa in May 2022, and the topic was the refugees and also the rights of the refugees. And in the event we have some speakers, also some practical examples, and it was also very, very nice to see that the audience, they were high school students. In Nuremberg, we have a different approach. Nuremberg is the city of the human rights, and the topic in this time was the link between the European Charter and the human dignity. And in this case, we had also some speakers explaining the European Charter from the legal point of view, but also from the practical point of view. And the target audience was different association and local organization. In November 2022, we have our event, our fourth event, and it was about the Charter 3, the Chapter 3 of the Charter is the equality, and in this case we involve the European ambassadors' schools of the parliaments, and we organize like mini debates about different articles about equality, gender equality, with the students, and it was also very interesting to see how the students prepare the presentation, they discuss with different point of views. It was also very, very rewarding for them and a way to get them know the European Charter. The other outcome is the learning platform. Here you have the link. You can check the link of our website, of our project website, and you can in this link you can enroll the training course. It has like different chapters related to the European Charter with questions, with some also like basis documentation that you can check before answering the question, and a kind of exams to get the certificate. The online debate, you can also check online. The online debate is also a link in our website. And here it was an online participation about how important is the Charter of Fundamental Rights. It's still open, you can still join these online debates. And the last point is the repository. We are working now in a repository about interesting documents related to the European Charter, and more or less that's all related to our project. Is an introduction to the debate, basically to know why you are here. This is the fifth event of our projects, this final debate, and we wanted also to give like the award or the more important event of our project, and I think it's going to be very interesting, and I thank you also the speaker for being here with us, and also to all the audience. Thank you very much.
You know, just while you've got the mic, how was it for you in terms of, you know, the project, you know, in terms of being like in this role, bringing together this grouping of people? Because often you've got projects funded in this way, which are consortium progress. Was it, I mean, can you share any of your learning with us?
Yes, it was. Okay, I have to say that at the beginning was a little bit difficult due to the COVID, but I suppose like in other European projects, but now I am really happy with the results, because the topic was not easy, no? Because the European Charter, I mean, Professor Celle knows, is hard stuff, no? You have to understand, you have to read, but we are really happy that we managed to approach the European Charter to different audience, and especially to the young people, and also the partners. We work very well as a team, and it was a good experience.
Do you think your relationships will continue post the funding?
Yes,
That's
of course, yes. Because we worked together previously in another project.
That's
Yes.
the beauty
some
of
of
it.
the partners.
Great, thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank
Thank you. So, we're now going to do a bit of a questionnaire. I don't know whether you call it Slido or Slido, whatever, but it's a set of questions that we have for you. And so my trusted ally and friend over there is going to help. What we should have is going to be a QR code on our screen any minute. Damn it, I thought we were going to be totally on cue. There we go. So could I get you to, you know, download that? Yeah, you can use your nearest screen.
We will be giving you about, a minute or two to fill out the questionnaire that pops up on your screen, and then we'll be going through the answers together.
Anyone still struggling to get the app, to download it?
I'm struggling with the questions.
That's a personal issue. No, I'm joking, Kaun. Are we good? Okay. Right, we're going to run through the questions and answers. So the first question, or the first set of results. There we go. Have you ever heard of the Charter of Fundamental Human Rights of the EU? Obviously, in this room, I can imagine. Okay. What court oversees the correct implementation of the Charter? That's easily done. Okay, let's move on. The religion one. We're clearly clear about that. Okay, moving on. Yeah. I mean, who came up with that question? Was that one of us in the team? Really? What's the point of that? That's not going to learn anything, are we? Goodness me. Sorry about that, but no, that's a silly question. Let's move on. When did the Charter come into effect? Okay, right. 2009. No, it came, don't forget, it was written many years before. It was only because it came into effect at the time of the Lisbon Treaty, 2009. So it was enshrined in that legal framework. Okay, let's move on. What do you think are the main challenges preventing full gender equality in Europe? Okay. Gender stereotypes from childhood. Resistance from from those less competent holding power. Patriarchy out there. Men, rights, lack of political will. All good stuff. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. No, thank you. It's a good way of just getting a sense of, notwithstanding the odd question, that it was a good way of getting a real sense of where you are in this room and what you think the issues are. But more importantly, I think it's about thinking about what are the things, the steps that we need to take in a practical, measured, but radical, hopefully, purposeful way to kind of move this agenda along, so we're not having this conversation in 10 years' time. I really hope we're not having this conversation in 10 years' time, really. So can I invite our speakers to please join me up here? So just a word about them. So we've got a law professor, we've got a current politician, a women's activist or lobby, and then you've got someone who was a politician but now has created a network of political leaders. So it's a really fine lineup we have for you for engaging in this conversation, and I do hope that you will also engage. I'm going to do as much as I can to make sure you're able to ask questions and engage in a conversation about what we might do. Just to let you know what we'd like to do at the end, so prepare yourselves please, is what are the things that we should be asking of the new EU mandate. You know, next year are the elections, European parliamentary elections, and then we have the new mandate being established for the European Commission as of 2024. So what should we, as a result of this conversation in this room, be demanding, asking, requesting of that policy book that civil servants will be preparing for the new commissioners that will take hold of Europe? So on this issue, what should we be asking? So I want us to kind of move in that direction. So it's a warning that, let's move to that, because otherwise we just end up debating the same thing and the same old chest beating happens, and we'll just continue to beat our chest about this issue rather than think about what are the practical measures or steps we need to take, or the policy ideas that might tip this in the right direction. So firstly, I want to go to Pierangelo. So share with us your thinking on, where have we got to? What requires further attention? Given, it's from 2009 to now, we've seen just in the past couple of years, changes on things like, pay transparency, asking companies to be a bit more transparent, etc. So there's been movement, albeit late, but there's movement. What's your view at the moment where we find ourselves in relation to that drafting on the Charter?
First of all, I wish to thank you, Friends of Europe, for the hospitality. I think that the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union is a very powerful law instrument because it both gives individuals a course of action to protect themselves from discrimination, because the Charter expressly forbids discrimination based on gender, and given that this right is applicable horizontally, this kind of protection can be enforced both against the state and against other individuals. Of course, within the scope of application of the European Union, and because the Charter expressly advocates for action to promote equality between men and women. Now, we have to consider that Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union, that is the article which set out the fundamental values on which the whole European Union is based, mention expressly the equality between man and human as one of the core values on which the whole building of integration must be built. Therefore, I think that the added value is that all the actions of the European Union must expressly take into consideration the promotion of equality as one of the integral part of the approach to any kind of action. And the example you made of the transparency is a good example that you cannot have a sectorial approach, but you have to have a very horizontal approach, because the causes of inequality are very often hidden in structural problems which are not self-evident. There is an easy example. In many cases, some professions are, you can see a very significant gap between women and men. And the reason of the gap is not because women are less prepared to deal with this kind of profession, but because the society is structured requiring women usually to give care, for example, to children in the family or to old parents, and therefore the lack of services which help women, this kind of activity, prevents women to have the time and the availability to take up roles which are very time consuming and which are not compatible with the requirement, for example, of having to pick up the children at school. So very often the reason of the inequality is the lack of an action in completely different areas of the activity. Now, I think that the Charter, since it forbids also indirect discrimination, which is this kind of a penalization, which is the result not of a formal discrimination, but of not taking into consideration the specific circumstances in which a particular group is, and which bring that group in a disadvantaged position. I think that this kind of approach is should be used more proactively, because it's a typical situation, we may call it intersectionality, so a number of circumstances which make a group more vulnerable to apparently gender-neutral rules or gender-neutral approach. I think, for example, we have a clear example, for example, concerning the use of religious symbols at work, which seems to be a gender-neutral issue, but in fact targets specifically women because most of the rules concerning religious clothing targets women. So you can't separate the issue of equality from the issue of religion. So I think that the way forward should to incorporate this kind of approach, which takes into consideration indirect discrimination in all kind of activities, not only when we deal with high-level principles, but in any policy, in any regulation, in any kind of activity, you have to pause and say how this is going to impact women, taking into consideration a lot of external factors which may prevent women to take full advantage of a policy, or which may prevent women from being involved in that kind of policy.
So like a gender proofing or gender impact assessment of policy design and policy impact.
So
okay.
This is one of the reasons the Commission action is very innovative, because the latest European Commission action is the latest action use both gender mainstreaming and intersectionality as tools to promote equality. And I think that this kind of approach should not only be used by when we act at the European Union level, but also when we act at state level and at local level, because a lot of activities which may benefit and create a better participation of women are in fact within the competence of local authorities. And the impact can be made at the local level.
Indeed. I mean, the thing is that mainstreaming has such a loaded sense about it, and I think that some of the things that we need to be is more specific, and that the kind of gender proofing or gender impact assessment of design and impact is very clear, very specific. The only issue is that, in my experience, that we have to have the right governance around it. So you might have middle managers in the Commission doing it, but if it doesn't go up as, you know, this is the choice you need to make one way or the other because of the impact, that's going to be where the rub, where it cuts, no? In your experience, have you seen it get into a better governance model anywhere in your work so far?
Yes,
yeah?
I agree with you. I think that one of the issues issues is that the lack of representation at the level of decision impacts, because even I teach human rights law, for example, and but I do not have a personal experience of the kind of impact in which some decision may have on the situation of a professor who has my same role but is a woman. So I think that one of the key issues is that the decision-making level, at all level, should have the presence of women and men, not only because it's for a matter of equality, but because in substance, the only way to have this kind of approach depends on having the experience of the external factor which are going to impact on the scene. Because if I make a decision, I rely on my own life experience, which is different from the life experience of a woman. I may not, having not personally experienced it, this is why intersectionality is so important, because since I have not personally experienced some kind of issues, I have no possibility of use this kind of experience in the decision-making process. And that's why I think that in order to bring this kind of approach, a very important instrument is the new program concerning the representation in the boards of companies, for example. And I think that the same approach should be used for the representation in local government boards, especially the boards of all the companies which deal with the services to the general population, which should be, in which there should be an adequate gender representation.
Sure.
Because this is a structural issue which prevents the using the gender mainstreaming approach, in my opinion.
Okay, right. I'm interested in your views on some of this, actually. So use the hashtag if you want to, or just like, put your hands up to have that debate. Because I understand what you're saying, Professor, and that my issue is that it's a double whammy for women, because if you don't get into the decision-making processes, those decisions aren't, by your analysis, it means that we won't get those decisions taken. And I suppose I'm more inclined to thinking that there should be more of a public duty, if you like, on decision makers, some sort of legal framing that compels them that despite their life experiences, they should damn well look at data. What's the data in terms of how we spend money on an issue, on a policy area, different when we think about how much of that goes on a women-related or gender-related issue. What do we do in terms of provision for childcare? What do we do in terms of so there's ways in which you can use data to inform yourself regardless of personal experience. But let's come back to that, because I'd be interested in your views about whether there should be, in Europe, a public duty on politicians or policymakers to create gender equality. And I give you, and it's not pie in the sky, so I used to work in the Commission for Racial Equality in the UK, and the only way we made movement on racial equality was that we framed a legal duty. And it meant that the CEO of a company or an organization, if they didn't do stuff, they were found not to do stuff, they either had a fine or they failed. They potentially faced imprisonment. That's the only way that we were able to really change the mindset. It suddenly became important. And so it changed dynamics. Unfortunately, things have changed since then, back in the day. But, there you go. Karen, I would have invited you in. You've been, active in politics a very long time. You're on the committee, Women's Committee, etc. And you've been working in this field. Give us your take about, you've seen so much. I mean, you're obviously very young, but I'm saying that, when you just think about what's happened in the past 10 years, I'm shocked by the fact that we're now talking about women's right to choose. All of a sudden, all over the world, abortion has become politicized, and women suddenly are having to face the consequences of actually thinking, my goodness, I thought I just could choose. And suddenly it's become a new political narrative. Over to you in terms of where it should be on.
But perhaps it comes on now. I think, you have an excellent question in the title. Is gender equality in Europe, is it progress or retreat? I think it is progress, but we have a situation where we have a very large silent majority supporting women's rights and the right to choose sexual and reproductive health rights. We saw that when we had the Matic report debated in the European Parliament. We had a very lively debate with a minority of the parliament being against having the right to choose and sexual education, sexual health, reproductive rights. But when it came to the vote, it passed with a very large majority. Right. So we need to make sure that we get this majority to be more vocal and speak out more. And I think what we've seen the last 10 years is actually linked to the rise of populist authoritarians, because you see a lack of respect for human rights, you see a lack of respect for minorities, and they try to cling on to power by appealing to parts of the population that feel that they're not listened to. So they appeal also to specific religious groups. They try and motivate and activate churches and religious communities, as we see, for example, in Poland, where the current government and political party in power are supported by the Ordo Iuris, a religious organization. And then they use this to attack human rights and the democratic institutions. And I think this is a sort of hijacking of individual rights that we see not only in Europe, but also across the world. And it's not only gender equality, men, women. It's also the LGBTIQ community that is under attack. And most recently, quite sort of viciously, we've seen it in Scotland with the issue of trans rights. And I think it's important that we do not look at this as individual aspects, but look at it as a whole.
Great, thank you very much. If you were to think about the things that we need to do quite dramatically, if you like, because we shouldn't be having this conversation in 10 years' time. Just from your experience in politics and on the committee you're in, what do you think will fly, in terms of what we can do to accelerate progress on this agenda?
I think we need to be more vocal, also in sort of general misinformation. We think that we're part of the majority, that everybody understands the importance of human rights, of democratic institutions, free media, and therefore we don't need to be as active as the people spreading misinformation. What they need to do is just to place doubt in people's minds. And we are not active enough in our communication on the importance of gender equality, of the importance of equal rights, and we need to get a lot more active because the European Parliamentary Forum for Reproductive Rights, they came out with a report a year or 2 years ago called Tip of the Iceberg, showing how much more funding is going to this sort of anti-gender agenda. And they have the funding and they are organized, and we need to become a lot more organized in fighting for the maintenance of basic human rights, also as part of an open and democratic Europe. Sort of from a sort of policy point of view, I think we need to look at the Istanbul Convention and the facts and the input from experts into this very important piece of convention from the European Council. I'm always getting this wrong. The European Council, the one in Strasbourg, saying that we need to look at misconceptions of gender, patriarchal structures, and make sure that there is an education around this. And this vocal minority is actually fighting against this as it is now. I think it looks like the European Union will ratify the Istanbul Convention by the end of the Swedish presidency, we hope. And I think implementing this in all of our policies, both at a national, European, and local level, is important. And then also, if we want to have gender mainstreaming, we need the data. At the moment, we don't actually have a lot of gender segregated data, so we don't know how men and women, for just looking at it in a binary way, function in society, what the services provided for them are. At the moment in the FEMM committee, we're looking at women and transport. You can say, well, how is transport gendered? Well, transport is gendered because of the structural, cultural habits that we have in organizing our households and families, whereas a lot of the care and the organizing of the household falls on the women in the family. And so you have a lot of sort of transport chaining. You just don't go from home to work in the office and then back again. You go from home to institutions with the kids, to the supermarket, to the office and back. So you have different transport systems, and you need to plan that into the way that you organize transport.
Sure.
And if you don't have enough women taking the decisions, one of our suggestions is actually that you have more consultations to hear the voices of women that are not in the room where the decisions are being taken, so that you get that input. One of the changes that a municipality in Sweden did was looking at how they removed snow from transport. And by changing the priority of removing snow from the streets from where the cars were driving to where the sidewalks, to take the sidewalks first, it actually made a big difference in a gender balance, because it was mainly women walking with the kids or walking with strollers that needed to be able to access and go about their daily lives, more than men that had the habit of just getting into the car and driving. And therefore, even such a thing as snow removal can be a gender issue.
Of course, absolutely. But also the multiplier is it also has a positive impact on older people. So we lose sight of the intersectionality potentially, or the fact that if you deal with an issue here, it has a ripple effect on so many other communities. Thank you, Kaun. I'll come back to you. I want to open up to some of you in the floor before I go to our let's say more on the political advocacy side of the debate, where we've got two people who've done amazing things things also. Just take your reflections on what you've heard so far. What's your reaction to some of this? I'm particularly keen on hearing, because we've got quite a lot of young people in the audience here. What your view is on where we find ourselves. And, you know, if you don't put your hand up, I'll just pick on you. Not so much of the young person I was looking for, but I'm not ageist about that at all. No, thank you, sir, for being brave. Please. No, here's a mic. Can you say who you are, please?
Yes, sorry to present myself. I'm Claudiu Ștefani. I'm working for the University of Alba Iulia in Romania. And I want to consider this. In order to influence a public decision, we have to use two kind of arguments that works. First is money, the different kind of money advantages, and the second, very important, it's votes.
Votes.
Votes, yes, because people in position of decision depends on the votes. If the votes of the woman count more, their decisions take taken
okay, sure.
About the woman interest.
Yeah.
No. Then it's another expression. Okay, that's
okay.
That's the movement of a woman and organizing. It's about advocacy.
Sure.
Actually, it's an advocacy campaign. If in order to make change, this kind of structural change, we need a new decision in public policy. But this new policy is possible just if women count on vote more.
So politicize gender equality. Well, I suppose improve the currency of the women's vote, but also monetize gender equality is what you're saying. Okay, very interesting. Arguments that have been made in this front before. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Over here at the front, and also some of you, come on. Excellent. Oh, please do introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Heilike Volma. I work in the Secretariat of the Commission's Task Force on Equality. And I was just reflecting coming to this event that, we've been talking about backlash and democratic backsliding for quite a while. I remember, 2017, for instance, in the Commission we organized a fundamental rights colloquium on women's rights in turbulent times. And I think even then they had been turbulent for quite a few years. So I was wondering what our distinguished panel would say to kind of how the backlash and the backsliding has changed or morphed over the past, let's say, decade. Is it just kind of more of the same? And also, in terms of our response, I think at the EU level and certainly many member states, we've tried to take various actions. Not just tried, we have taken action, but clearly it's not enough to kind of change the course of things yet. So definitely agree with being more vocal, but I'm just thinking if there's any other more concrete ideas of what we're not yet doing. Indeed.
From your perspective, I know you're inside the Commission, so I'm not asking you to make a political comment, but from what you're dealing with and what you're doing at work, do you feel that we've made progress? Do you feel frustrated or do you feel optimistic?
Inside the Commission, I definitely feel optimistic in terms of the progress that we've made with the internal structures. So I work in the Task Force on Equality, which is an innovative structure that basically has mainstreaming at its core. So for the first time, the Commission has an equality coordinator in every single DG who is mainstreaming not only gender, but also the other 5 grounds of non-discrimination. So I think that's a big progress. And
that's how soon, that's very recent though, isn't it?
Yes, this commission.
That's right, it's this commission, yeah.
So let's just hope that this continues in the next commission.
No, thank you for that, because as I was talking about my frustrations, so one of the first events I moderated on this issue was some 4 years ago with Commissioner Jourova. She had the portfolio, and again, much of a room like this, and we were talking, and she says, her frustration is proposals to create structural systemic change have been around for ages. They'd be put up to the council, and the council will always reject them. And at that it was at the top end. So it's because the decision-making powers in the council level. So these are the political leaders of the member states did not think it was important enough to create pay transparency. Now we have it. That proposal is 6 years old. Let's face it. So there's an issue here about political leadership that we need to get to grips with. And she was very clear that as a commissioner, and this is pre this current commission, I think it's very different now because we've got a much more of a, let's say, pro-gender commission than we've ever had, actually, with a woman as a leader as well. But she found it really difficult that to find the social mores politically to be able to have this idea of reducing inequality, but actually not getting beyond that top end of the council. So it's a real issue that perhaps, hopefully, we can change over time. But I'll bring that issue back to the panel. The gentleman at the back there. Where's our Mr. Microphone? There we go. Please do introduce yourself.
Thanks a lot. I'm Stefano Spinaci from the European Parliamentary Research Service. First thing I would like to, so I have 3 points. First point is I would like to introduce an analysis of what is going on with the green transition. So the environmental issues are more recent, but we are going faster. It seems that on the issue of gender equality, which has kind of 1,000 years of history. And we didn't introduce this subject, for example, in economic governance, while everything which is Green Deal is starting to go also in the economic governance. So I think that the big difference is that the green transformation is also a business opportunity, and the gender equality is not seen as a business opportunity.
Right.
So we have to find the business case to sell this also as a business opportunity. And there are business cases at country level, at company level, and so on. The second point is about the concept of intersectionality. And I like this idea of having more equality in the board, especially at the local, regional level. But then I thought, I read about some debate on Green Deal, and they were all in the evening. And guess, the women, they couldn't go most of the time because they had to take care of the family. So why we are not creative? And also at the local level, most of the meetings of the council are in the evening. So or we fix some rule that in the evening should not, or we fix some kind of scheme that if you are women and you have baby or kids to take care of, you have the rights of babysitting. So you get some kind of compensation for that activity that you are doing. Because otherwise we can fix rule, but there are some obstacles still, practical obstacles. And third, it's a kind of provocative proposal. At my time, I made my military service. Now I think there is civil service. I would propose civil service doing babysitting. So understanding or doing anyway days of life of a woman, for men, and fitting in the boots of a woman. And maybe that would help us as men to understand all the obstacles, all the difficulties that a woman experiences day by day. Thanks.
Thank you for your provocative and thoughtful contribution. Thank you very much. I'm going to pick on two people. I'm going to pick on you because I've caught your eye, and I'm going to pick on you as well. I just want to get your view on. You don't have to. If you just say I don't want to talk, that's fine. But I just want to hear your reaction to what you're hearing. So say who you are.
My name is Paula Salinas. I work at FTI Consulting, but we work along Grupo Social 11, which is the the social group for the blind in Spain. I work particularly in the Fundación 11. So I was just thinking of Stefan's intervention, Stefan, right? On how we have to see gender equality as a business opportunity, how to make the case for it. And I think it's very important that we see it this way. And I'm thinking, what initiatives of the European Union go in this way? And I think of the Social Economy Action Plan. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. And in the Social Economy Action Plan, there are measures to further women entrepreneurs, and also, within the social economy, you touch many intersection. You kind of hit all of the points. So I think the business opportunities for gender equality could be touched upon other economic models, such as the social economy, which the union has initiatives for. Yet, it seems like sometimes with the European Union, I'm not from the European Union, I'm Colombian, by the way. So what I see working inside the bubble, but being from the outside, is that these are all so very valuable initiatives, but somehow they're not publicized enough. So the social economy one is super important, but somehow other initiatives gain more traction, like the Green Deal, the Industrial Plan. There are big business opportunities.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Wait, I'm gonna catch my breath.
That's okay.
Okay, so that's one thought.
Yeah.
And I see gender equality as just a young person, a young woman, a non-European but working in the European Union, being retreating somehow. More in terms of the narrative. I see, for example, big scandals like Andrew Tate. I don't know if you guys seen that. That somehow radicalize young men and men around women. And I think the more we stabilize the importance of gender equality, because this is not a debate, we need it. I think it's sort of a global approach to it. The more we radicalize other younger generations against it. So it's also achieving this sort of narrative which gives us a stable foot on which we can work in without radicalizing other generations, which is, I think, is a very difficult task.
Thank you. I'm so glad I asked you. Thank you very much. So, and that's not to set you up to think, oh my God, I've got to do it, but it's just, I just want to hear, and we want to hear, just your honest reflection on, you know, what this debate and what you feel the issues ought to be or are not being addressed. Whatever you want to say.
Okay, well, I wanted to say that I thought that the proposal from...
Say who you are
yes,
first.
who am I?
Yes.
I'm Ashlyn Garvey. I'm one of Kaun Melchior's assistants. So okay, yeah, so here we go.
I didn't know that, by the way, colleagues, as you saw, right?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I thought it was very interesting what you just said, and it actually made me realize that despite the fact that we are all talking about making men more sensitive to what most women deal with in care responsibilities by, for example, I don't know, the provocative proposal of making them babysit.
Yeah.
I feel like I was actually talking about this with my friends, and we are in our 20s, late 20s now, and we are already thinking of like our parents who are still quite young now, but slowly aging, and it made me think. A lot of my friends, like with my women friends, we were thinking like a lot of my women friends have brothers, and so do I. And we all immediately assume that we will be the ones taking care of our aging parents. Like it's just, yeah, we'll have to.
Built in,
yeah,
isn't
but I mean, we like to think we're progressive and something like that. But I think that our brothers also expect that we will be there to take care of our aging parents, and that's a very like niche thing. And that it was just a thought that flew to my head just now. And I think that's something that's going to be very hard to change, because obviously nobody, like, we will not just abandon our relatives, basically. And so long as men, most men, not all men, obviously, expect that their sister or like their cousin or niece will be the one taking care of, they will not really take initiative in helping. And I really don't know how you're going to change that, because it's so ingrained even in people who are relatively young now still. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So but it has to be in the home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, there's something here that's the unsaid truth about how women perpetuate a norm that's intergenerational and centuries old. And how do you enable that to be, you know, dealt with? Because it is as much about that. And, you know, that's a difficult one. That's a difficult one that we need to have open conversations about. You wanted to have a word here? And my colleagues, I will bring both of you, but this is great stuff, no? Exactly, yeah. Great, go on.
Well,
say who you are.
Sorry, my name is Jessica Lutz. I have a life and leadership coaching practice, and I work a lot with women, high achievers who want more impact. And this very question that you brought up has been bugging me. How come that we are retreating despite all the money, all the effort that is being thrown at getting gender equality? I've done a lot of research, and my conclusion basically is that it is indeed a big part of it. You called it baked in. Yes, it is baked in. We women tend to like caring. We tend to value caring, and men tend to like that less. They like other things, and I call the two. I want to pull it away from the gender discussion, because I think the gender discussion is polarizing. Like the young Spanish lady said, the young men are, and not only young men, are radicalizing against the whole issue. But if we look at how we use our mind, whether we prioritize the well-being of the people around us or whether we prioritize our own well-being, then you'll find that there are actually quite a lot of men who also prioritize the well-being of the people around us. So if we start looking at it through that lens and start bringing more balance in how we approach families, work, etc., but we can then call on the men who are, I call it we-minded, to bring more balance in especially leadership, but in all layers of society.
Thank you. Do you want to come in? Yes, just there. Again, say who you are, please.
Sure. Aida Rejanovic, QFI, and organization that is actually supporting the teaching and learning of Arabic as a modern foreign language in public schools.
Yeah.
So listening to all of this, being a woman, being a parent, being a leader, so one thing that and then especially actually working with education is, one thing that bothered me for quite some time is decline in the civic education in schools. So we are already by the time that we are dealing with an issue, we're talking about young people who are in their they're 18, they're 20, they're 25, instead of really bringing them to a different way of thinking, starting at an early age. So when we're talking about civic education, it's all about the government, what it means to be a proper citizen and everything else. But then at the same time, we are not producing, well-educated voters, young voters.
No, indeed.
And we're introducing all of adults with different skin colors. We're using transgender adults and everything else, but we're still not addressing the issue of employment. Caretakers. Usually we're all very quick to say, oh, I have an aging parent. I'm going to let's hire a woman to take care of. We never say let's hire a man. When we are hiring a babysitter, it's always a woman. Somehow even as a woman, actually we don't trust a man, to do that, a male nurse versus female nurse and everything else.
Sure.
So, even with the civic education, even with an early education, we are doing nothing to fix that. Talking to the boys, and you mentioned the families, okay? There's my family, so that woman is okay in my family, but then, any other woman that I'm dealing with is just, an object. So, that perception that comes through the proper civic education that actually should start at an early age, but then, unfortunately, I don't see the young generation insisting on that.
No. But that, is that the fault of education system? But let's have that debate. And thank you very much. But also thank you for that whole thing about radicalization of men, the Andrew Tate stuff. Why isn't there an equivalent woman on the platform saying, bugger off, and having a different narrative about women's strength to counterbalance the ugly nonsense that he projects. However, let's move to Laura. Laura, women's lobby. And, it's been a fascinating conversation so far. And, I was going to ask you what are the experiences, people that you've come across, but I would like you to flip that. And you can say a little bit about that, but it's more about a forward-looking agenda, about given what you've experienced, what you've seen in the women's lobby. You're quite a well-known outfit, trusted in this space. What more should we be focusing on? Thank you.
Maybe I can first answer the Andrew Tate question,
sure.
actually.
Please
because
do.
We focus a lot on online violence against women and girls, and I think one of the reasons why women are more vocal online is also the fact that they are being harassed online, and that this also can spill over into the real world. Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why women are also silenced online, and they cannot maybe access the same digital spaces safely than men. So that's one of the reasons. But maybe in general, the European Women's Lobby, we are over 2,000 member organizations in EU countries and beyond. So we have a very diverse range of experience and also organizations. And I think the things that we would like to focus more on is really harmonization on EU level, on legislation that we talked about a bit already today, because we see the EU really as they can give the values and the legal frameworks that then we can use in the different member states. And we have such diverse experiences in the member states, talking about access to justice, even just on the definition of rape in a consent-based or not consent-based way, on violence against women in general, but also, just on the access of sexual health and reproductive rights. So all of these issues that we still have and that we're still talking about today are really, we could use the EU and also the Charter of Fundamental Rights really as a tool to have this harmonization, and also to really make sure that these values are more spread over the EU and are not the victim of this backlash. And maybe I would like to answer also the question on backlash and women's organizations, etc., because we also see this on a daily basis, that this backlash and backsliding is getting stronger and stronger, and we're also fearing this for the EU elections 2024. So we notice this on harassment and also on online spaces a lot, but we also notice this a lot on the cutting of funding, and this is something that's really important for us as civil society and women's rights organization, because we do a lot of work on the local level, regional level. We are running women's shelters, we are advocating for change on the local level as well. So this cutting of funding is something that's very important for us to change that, because we all need money to also run our services, etc. So I think this is it comes all back to the main and core issues of how to counter the backlash, how to make more women participate also in the democratic processes, how to have more women run for office as well. So all of these things are for us very connected. And I think that's the big question of today, maybe also how we can also all together be more connected to fight this on the EU level, but also I heard so many nice examples on the local and regional level as well, to make sure that this is working together at EU level.
Laura, so in terms of, we have a commission, so Team EU is the most gender balanced we've ever had in the history of the Union. There are more women now in middle positions across the European institution in a way we've not had before, and this has happened in the past 5 years mostly. So has that changed stuff from what you're experiencing as a women's lobby? If not, what more should we do?
On EU level, we can definitely see that this commission has been, also the women running Brussels so far, have really been advancing gender equality on the legislation side. So we had the Women on Boards Directive unblocked, the Patrons Penalty Directive now, the proposal on the Directive on Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. So there is a lot of progress happening, but we also have to make sure that this can then be transposed into the national legislation and also make the council, for example, that is always a big problem for us, to be sure that they also are on board with this kind of thing. And then we also have the counter development, that we also have some very conservative women in place also in national government. So this is of course also something, when we want more women in politics, we have also the diverse range of political opinions. So this is something what we also have to deal with, because not all women are feminist women or for gender equality. So I think this is something that is a bit of a challenge for all of us.
I think people confuse the two, don't they? Because absolutely, equality of opportunity is not to suggest that you're not going to get a fascist who is a woman, but you want to make sure that she has the same rights as anyone else to get into office. But equality is a different matter, and I think that we just sometimes confuse the two too often and create the burden of that, every woman has to be the one that actually carries the call. Thank you for that. I'll come back to all of you in a moment on the, as we conclude and bring back the audience again. But I want to move to you, Karen. Thank you, Silvana. Thank you for being with us. You've been in politics for quite some time, and you're now the founder and president of the Women's Women's Political Leaders. Yeah, absolutely. The point is, we've got more women in political representation than we've ever had before. Across the Union, right? And elsewhere, even in the Western Balkans, you can see it where you didn't think it would actually be possible, but Albania sticks out, in the top 10 of political representation of women. But does it really change anything? What's, from your perspective, what do you see as kind of the issues from the women you're speaking to? The women that are related, are having these conversations with you about being in politics?
Well, thanks for this question, but let me first be a bit less optimistic than what when we look at the EU Council family photo, it's still pretty much a very male photo. And Europe is the world leader when it comes to women in top political positions of all the continents. More than 90% of the world's presidents and prime ministers are men. More than 80% of the world's ministers are men. More than 70% of the world's parliamentarians are men. So Europe is the best place for women in politics. And we all know what it's like, right? I was on a call yesterday evening where somebody called politics the high temple of male patriarchal toxic environment. I thought, well, that's quite a harsh wording, but I think what the big challenge is that we're still talking about
changing women so that they're fit for office, instead of saying, actually, the system is wrong. It was conceived a couple of 100 years ago when women had neither the right to vote nor be elected, and it's been hardly changed since, despite all the modernization and revolutions that happened elsewhere in the world. In digital tools, participation, consultations could be done so differently, but we in politics still keep a system going that is very much perpetuating privileges of a certain group. And I thought the discussion was fascinating, and also listening to the expectation that if there are more women in politics, then things will get better for women, right? And yes, that's clear. The data is showing a correlation. But if we turn this around, then it's clear that men represent the interest of what? Of men, right? And why do we keep on allowing them to do this? That I think is a really, really important question. We have done in the past 5 years an index together with Kantar Public, which is called the Reykjavik Index for Leadership, where we measure in the G20 countries the perceptions of people on suitability for leadership position, and including politics. And what is quite striking are two general things, and one for my home country, Germany specifically. Striking is that there is a lack of progress, despite more women in more visible leadership position. And yes, there are, and there are, well, it's actually so many that we don't know all of them by name anymore, which I guess is progress. Before we could list them all, and usually in less than 60 seconds. But so yes, there are, but there's lack of progress. Then also the youngest surveyed cohort of men has a higher degree of stereotypes, of prejudice against women in leadership than the men of, let's say, my age group, 50 plus or older, which I think is pretty bad already. So, and this relates to the Andrew Tate question. So how do we change it? How do we gender equality, the terminology, the narrative out of a certain area where we still need to seem to defend the concept instead of being able to turn this around? And let me just because I know you have plenty of other questions, let me finish by I love Iceland, not only because of the Reykjavik Index, because when you go there, it's as close as we can get at this current globe on a society that's more gender equal. And the big game changer there was 3-month maternity leave, 3-month paternity leave. And the father wasn't able to say, hey, darling, I continue making the money and you look after the kids, and then later on, your parents. But it's like, it's gone if he doesn't take it. And this was a game changer for everything. How employers look at employees, domestic work share, relation to kids, family duties, and then other legislation followed. And I used to be a liberal, and I believed in that if you make a business case, things work. But coming from Germany, there's business case for having more women in business. Germany is very proud of its business, and still there's one stock exchange listed big company in Germany that has a woman CEO. One, exactly. Right? And just on your point of women like to take care of things, at some point, my partner and I, we had 3 kids under the age of 5. I dreaded traveling with them because this is something that really stresses me. Screaming babies always freak me out if it's my own or others. It's just not my thing. Sorry, I'm just that way. I know there's a normative backlash saying things on women. They kind of say, well, why? He doesn't care. He's like totally chilled. So when he was traveling alone with the 3 kids, everybody praised him. Oh my God, you're such a great dad. Can I help you? Wonderful. Me traveling with my 3 kids, one of them screamed, oh, can't you get it quiet? So it's like, it's a completely different expectation. And this just shows how ingrained those stereotypes are. And well, then to get to a leadership position makes it a bit harder for women than for men.
Absolutely, Silvana, thank you. But also your comment that you find it so irritating, you can't even bear it, would be frowned upon by many people. Say, how could she say that about her own children? You know, and so it's just ridiculous. But you know, I've just been speaking to a number of women politicians in the past couple of weeks, and very strong women, but still the narrative of our biggest argument in the morning and the evening is what the job share. And how do we make this work with 3 kids? And it's phenomenal that, you know, these aren't politicians who are in their 50s. These are in their 30s, mid-30s, if you like.
Yeah, but the problem, I think, is that it's always a woman's issue.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think if we can't get this away, that it's sort of that this is even labeled a woman's issue, it's a societal one.
Completely.
And that we need to reframe that.
Precisely, and that was my opening point that, you know, we've got to, I mean, at what point do we start, you know, changing and shifting in, I suppose, shift the paradigm and invert it from one of, you know, asking, making the moral case, etc., to the one that norms gender equality into society. We have to find a way of, like, what rules do we need to change, or what's the worm in the system that will actually trip that system. So, I mean, this is my hashtag, not yours, Stefan, because I think I liked what you said, but how many of you think that, you know, hashtag in her shoes, as I call it, because that's what you're saying, is put a man in her shoes, or a woman's shoes, and see what it feels like. How many of you would think that, you know, the notion of having hashtag in her shoes would be a good way of moving some of this forward, i.e. that a man should spend, you know, a couple of hours every week, every day, doing things that are traditionally what women have to do? Hands up. Would you think that actually is that a way forward? Have I made myself clear? Perhaps I've confused you all. So the proposition was, he said, if a man could spend some time doing babysitting or doing other household chores, etc., care of his own children, which I'm calling hashtag in her shoes, i.e., you know, experience what it's like to be in your girlfriend's, your mother's, your partner's, etc., shoes for a couple of hours every week. Is that the way to go? Is that something that you would think actually it's a good way to start having a different kind of dialogue? Hands up. Yeah. And then, like, I want to, like, feel bad for her, so I'll help her or something. Okay. It needs to be more from, like, a starting point of we and our society. So I see where you're trying to go, but if we implement it now for every day, fine, but not as a pilot. No, I'm just trying to be provocative. I want to get you going and have a debate. Sorry. There you go.
Yeah, I also have an issue with that because it makes it sound as if it's something to resent. And yes, you were resenting your crying babies. Of course you were, because it's very stressful. You were resenting the stress. But I have an issue with the way we portray everything that women do as, oh, poor things, yeah, you know, men should help us, indeed. No, let's be proud of the fact that we are not men, that we are different. That's what I mean with being we-minded and valuing that very fact, that, you know, we should move away from a little bit, I mean, not totally, but from the individualist focus of our society, in order to make it just better for everybody.
Absolutely.
And it's not about, pitying the women and, yeah, they need support. They are poor victims.
Thank you. We have, I will come back to you, but I want to go to this lady there and the gentleman in the blue shirt afterwards. Please do introduce yourself.
Hi, yes. Good evening. I mean, good afternoon. My name is Valerie. I'm a creative freelancer. I've been listening to everybody's points, and I agree and disagree on various points. I think in general, one of the things that we need to work on a little bit better is just the communication between a man and a woman. I think that statistically a woman is more used to speaking more words per day than a man in general. And men, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I just think that's reality. And I think that men just need to, we need to understand that there is that difference in communication and respect it. And
there isn't. If you look at research on how much men and women speak in meetings, everybody will say that the women were speaking so much. But if you look at the statistics, they were speaking less than the men, but everybody thinks that they speak more.
But you're talking about generally in life, not just meeting context. Is that right?
I'm speaking about communication in general,
yeah.
just understanding between a man and a woman. Yeah. Because we have different perspectives, different experiences in life as with our genders, just the communication of those emotions and of the realities of our lives, I think that that's something that we could work on. Yeah. That's
great, thank you. Gentleman at the back there.
Hello everyone, I'm Borja Saez Martinez from the European Judicial Training Network, and I think, will this hashtag work? I'm not sure, but I don't think it will be that effective because the big changes in society, they tend to come through indirect ways. And I think, Silvana, you mentioned a clear example in Iceland, right? How such a policy that some people will not look at it in a gender perspective, but then has such an impact in society and changes complete different aspects that transcends everything. And bringing a conversation always on gender, right? You bring it on a table, dinner, then everybody gets like this. You have half the table in one way, half of the other table on the other side. And what you mentioned before at the beginning on radicalizing people, I think that if we do things in a subtle way, more indirect way, it works. So for example, I organize trainings on human rights for the judiciary. Of course, we have EU Charter, Fundamental Rights Agency. So we bring the topics on the table, right? And it tends to have always this backlash. The biggest change I've seen was in a complete indirect, nothing to do with gender seminar. So we had it was trafficking in human beings seminar. Yeah. So we brought victims, we have prosecutors, we have judges, and we brought victims, right? And one of the victims said, okay, it will be great if we can go to the seminar and speak directly. So we don't mention in a training a perspective. It's not put yourself on the shoes of a victim, bring the victim, and it will be she will be able to speak, right? Who did we bring? We brought a man. So probably as you're thinking right now, we were all, okay, I was not expecting this. Trafficking in human beings, the first victim you bring to talk is a man. And just this fact that those 5 seconds, the same as right now, we all changed and we said, okay. You see, we are not talking about gender, but all in my mind, if we think about THP, trafficking in human beings, I always think about women. And just by having this person there, of course, it was one person we brought 4 victims, the other one women, but everyone in the room, 40 people, we all changed indirectly. So after, when we were discussing during the lunch or the dinner topics of society regarding gender, we all changed the approach. And I think this indirect way of doing things, the same as this policy in Iceland, can have a bigger effect. And just to mention another thing, I think that, Karen, you mentioned a really interesting point at the beginning on this capital and political capital gains, right? And the approach of getting close to the churches, no matter which religion. I'm just talking about different groups that tend to have a deity and they tend to have certain ideologies. Of course, we can think about main 2 countries in the European Union that we can clearly see that they have a certain ideology as a state. Yes, we see that. But I see right now a problem everywhere, which is how indirectly one political party will take a certain action just to get political gain.
Sure.
And have an indirect act. Right now in Madrid, it just happened, just to mention this example, one political party got close to the churches, specifically because in South America, the churches, they tend to have a bigger impact, and they use those communities right now in Madrid to get close to politics. It has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with ideology, but indirectly, those ties will be there. And I think we do not see the impacts of that. So I think it's a really good approach to see the impacts that politics and political gains.
Okay, so you're saying, right, so let's cut to the chase. What you're saying is something about mandatory level action and policy level, which has systemic change rather than simply relying on persuasion, etc., and so forth. I'll bring you in because you created that really interesting point earlier on. So I will, as a result, but I know I'm running out of time. I've only got 5 minutes, colleagues, so because I want to bring the panel in.
Okay, so one day in her shoes, the hashtag. I think in practice it would work, but in theory it enrages me. I remember there was a time where the only way you could get a man to empathize on a rape was to say, imagine if it was your sister, imagine if it was your daughter.
Yeah.
And I think having to personalize the struggles of women for men to empathize is a wrong way to approach empathy. But in practice, I think it would work because, come on, like one day in our shoes, would they bear it? But I don't think it's the way of approaching it theoretically.
But wouldn't it be fun to make them all wear stilettos for a whole day? It'd be great, publicly. Sorry. No. So I have to, it has to be really 60 seconds. 60 seconds.
I want to share this.
But 60 seconds.
Yes, 10 seconds, please. I have 2 daughters. I take being in her shoes. I take care about my daughters. I take bath and other things. This is natural for my generation. My father didn't. And this happened in a conservative country like Romania. It's happened. So I think the things are changing, but not so fast, unfortunately. Because the society, the beliefs, the culture change in a lot of time, and our lives is too short, unfortunately.
Thank you for sharing that, about being in her shoes. So I'm going to start with yourself, Pierangelo. What's the one thing? So we want to be able to, so imagine in October this year, we want to be able to create 10 policy choices for the new EU mandate. And we're framing it around something which we're calling the renewed social contract. Because we believe we need to think about the power relationships and the responsibilities and the expectations we have of each other. And I don't mean just humans, institutions, private sector, civil society, and in this room. So we're calling, we're referring to that as a renewed social contract. That if given all that we've been through the past 5 years in particular, but also the past 10 years, that we need to shift our thinking and upend what we see as received wisdom about who does what and who takes responsibility. As we look ahead, so if given your experience, what's that one thing you think we should ask for or demand next year of the new EU mandate? Please take the microphone.
Well, I think that trying to canvas what I have received from the debate, it is very important to what I heard from, I didn't quite get it. So I think the approach should be, we need gender equality because we need to protect women, because that stereotype women as being in need of protection. And this is an approach which, for example, gives that if women, we have a protection for women which got pregnant and so they have a compulsory suspension from work as a way to protect a woman having children, which is just a stereotypifies that she is the one who is going to take care of the children.
Yeah, so therefore,
and
what's the thing?
That's actually protecting the privilege of men, which can say, oh, well, you are paid by the government to stay at home, I need to work, but the result is, if I am on the market for a job and I am a man, nobody will ask me if I am going to have children.
No,
while if you are a woman, you will be asked if you are going to have children. And that impacts on your pay.
Sure, we know that. Therefore, Pierangelo, what do you want? What do you want from the? How do we change that?
So
is that by
I
regulation or policy?
To change the way in which we think gender equality.
Okay.
Gender equality must be must show that it's an instrument for empowerment and for the common benefit of society, not to protect a weak individual, because that propagates a stereotype. Gender equality must focus on empowerment and common good.
Okay, so change the narrative about gender equality. Laura, what's that one thing? Based on what you're, obviously you can work with us on this journey as well, by the way, as a women's lobby, to craft a policy option. But what would that be? What's that one thing you'd think we should be asking for?
I have such a long wish list, so it's difficult to
I
decide
know.
on one thing. But I really like the point that you made on the legal duty and of the elected parliamentarians and people who work in the political field to really make sure that they are taking into account intersectional interests and women's interests and feminist interests as well. So I think this would be really on my wish list, and also really important for the next year to keep a 50-50 commission, to have this parity, but also to have a council configuration on gender equality, because we don't have this yet, and we need a space to talk about this on the EU level, and the gender equality commissioner, of course, as well. So these are a little bit of my wishes, but I have more.
Thank you. Lovely. Silvana.
My wish is not something the EU can decide, but I'd have it anyways. So for next year's elections, the EU level, but also the national elections, to make it mandatory for each political party to have parity among their pool of candidates, and also put the women candidates in constituencies where you can actually win, because that's a way to go around that parity thingy. So basically look at Mexico, what they did there, it worked, bring it to all EU countries and EU level.
Excellent. Right. Brilliant idea. We've got that noted. That sounds like a really good one. Because it's true. Once you get on the register, you always get put in the bum seats where you're not going to achieve. So that's a really good one to actually storm the system. Karen.
In the systems that have closed party lists,
yes.
We need to have a proper implementation of the new directive on parental leave, because it's not just about men doing women's jobs, but actually taking responsibility of how to run the household. And you only learn that when you're stuck with all of the responsibility yourself. And then I think we need men discussing the toxic gender norms and how it damages them, because you're not allowed to show other emotions than anger, basically, as a man. Not allowed to cry, you're not allowed to care. And I think we really need to discuss how that damages and hinders men in living their full lives. And then I think we need to look at women on boards, which, yes, we've now have legislation on this at a European level. But if you look at the statistics on who is in management positions in an organization like the European Parliament, it goes very well up to a certain level, until it's the political groups that take the decision, and then suddenly there is a big majority of men in these positions. So when it's the conference of political presidents, they need to make a political deal about who gets what jobs. It's still majority men that gets those jobs.
So what would you see to happen? What would you like to see happen? So you've talked about the parental leave directive. Or what's the thing for next year that you think this is what they really need to do?
We need to, as institutions, we need to not only ask our companies to do this, we need to do it ourselves. We need to actually sort of walk the talk. We have now a pilot project in the European Parliament of having menstrual products in the visitors' toilets. Because of course we should have. It took 3 months of questors meetings and requests and whatever. Now we have the pilot product. I mean, it's small things, but it's just like highlighting that we actually need to make our spaces welcoming for all. And then two sort of political gains is we need to have the choice to decide over our own bodies, because that is the first step to equality. And then, of course, we need to have a council configuration for equality of gender. We have one for fisheries. Why not for equality?
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good. I'm so sorry, I'm 6 minutes over time. I hope you'll forgive me. But it was worth it, I hope, you think. There's a good debate. And, I suppose, as ever in these things, colleagues, we'll walk out. But just think about the one thing you might want to do. And I say to the men, make sure next time, bring some more men with you. And how do you think about making sure men can have these conversations? And I think that point you made about radicalization of men, we have to understand that there's two ends of the spectrum here. There's cultural, environmental, and there's systemic. What I mean by that is that women and mothers will norm behaviors just as much as the system does. So you have young teenage girls who will look at a guy that's not behaving as she perceives and not being a certain way, that will reinforce a view or a role for themselves. Men do that about women all the time. But we have to understand the pressure, the impact of peer pressure and norming that we do of each other. And until mothers change how they do that with their boys, and how girls do that with men, with expectations of manliness and masculinity, we have to think about that. It's a two-way street in that regard. But the system stuff is really, I think, what I'd be interested in hearing from all of you is whether should we have a legal obligation, a European public duty for gender equality? Can I have your hands up whether you think there should be a legal duty of gender equality placed on the European Commission? And great, almost unanimous. Take a picture, somebody. Honestly, too late. My lot, honestly. Colleagues, thank you very much for being here, and take care of yourselves and look after yourselves. See you again. Thank you.